All right, here we go. One. Hi, everyone. It's Tricia Russell with Fear to Freedom, and we are here today for another Facebook Live, but it's actually my last Facebook Live as the Executive Director, and I just want to welcome you guys today, and I'm so glad that you've chosen to join us. Today, we are going to be chatting with Rebecca Rose from the LGBT Life Center here actually in our area in Norfolk, and we're just going to have a little conversation with her and hopefully learn some new things. And Rebecca, I'm going to just let you tell us a little bit about the center and yourself, and then we'll jump into questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Like Tricia said, my name is Rebecca. I am the crisis counselor at the LGBT Life Center. So I manage our intimate partner violence program, which is a program that serves victims that experience intimate partner violence, sexual violence, even human trafficking, that identify as part of the LGBT community. We offer an array of different services: safety planning, crisis intervention, case management services, legal advocacy services, medical advocacy. I can go with them to the hospital or to medical appointments as it relates to the violence if needed, just to provide that support. We also have, we do a closed group once or twice a year, just on, I call it the foundation for the future, kind of building, knowledge and a foundation to kind of move forward in healthy relationships. And we are also in the process of hopefully starting an open support group that will meet monthly or twice a month as well. So be on the lookout for that. But the LGBT Life Center is a nonprofit agency. We're located in Norfolk, but we serve the greater Hampton Roads area. We have an array of different services. So the Intimate Partner Violence Program is part of our mental health program. Also in the mental health program, we provide individual, group, and family counseling, couples counseling to adults and children and adolescents. This is on a sliding scale. We work with many different insurances and have throughout the pandemic definitely increased our volume of being able to provide virtual counseling services for sure. We also have a housing department, and we have a prevention department that does STD and HIV testing. We have a partnership with Can Community Clinic where we can provide primary care services as well as, infectious disease care and things like that. We have a food pantry. We have an array
Oh
of
my
different
goodness.
services. Yeah. So we try to provide, those wraparound services for victims and kind of meet those needs where we can, just to, help provide, that support network in that community.
That's amazing, Rebecca. Even I'm learning something today. I didn't realize you all provided all those services. And what I love is it's really one place where the community can come to you all for different things. It doesn't just have to be for one thing, and they don't have to go here and here and there. So
Absolutely.
that's amazing. I'm glad you got to share all that with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved with this? What brought you to work for this?
Yeah, so intimate partner violence has really been my passion. And with that, of course, comes, working with victims of sexual violence, which can happen a lot in intimate partner relationships. I have been working in the victims field for the past 5 or so years. I have done court advocacy work within the court system. I've worked at domestic violence shelter, meeting victims in many different positions there. And I've also worked with child protective services. So I've worked with children victims as well. In that role, I dealt a lot with, child sexual assault as well. So I have an array of kind of an experience working with many different victims at many different points in, the victim survivor, spectrum there. So I've kind of dedicated my career to victim work. It's definitely my passion, and something that I am, definitely very passionate about. Can
No,
get on my
that's
soapbox
wonderful.
real easily. So
Well, and it sounds like your experience, you've kind of run the gamut on the different types of victims. So I would imagine in the position you're in now, that helps you quite a bit be able to relate and understand and help to deal with the different different types of victims that come to you. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit more about the Life Center, and maybe specifically, your area. Um, I I definitely, obviously, we deal with victims as well, and counseling and therapy are very important
Mhm.
aspects of a survivor's healing process. Maybe speak a little bit to that as to why that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of our services that we offer for the Intimate Partner Violence Program are completely free of charge to victims. Most of our services are, like I said, the individual counseling and things like that can be on a sliding scale depending on your insurance and things like that. But I think it's important because our agency is able to provide LGBT specific counseling. So we provide counselors that are able to acknowledge the differences that people within the LGBT community may be facing. And it's also important because, like in the Intimate Partner Violence Program, I offer a lot of services that say maybe a domestic violence shelter would offer, minus the shelter piece, of course. Um, the case management, different things like that. But what kind of sets us apart is that we are able to look at it through a lens of recognizing the differences that come within the LGBT relationship, recognizing the different barriers that they may face, the different, aspects, the different warning signs you may see, the different, dynamics of that relationship for sure. So it's able to kind of recognize those differences, acknowledge and celebrate the diversity, but at the same time acknowledging the trauma that they may face because of those identities, and kind of all of the stigma and everything that comes with that. So kind of mixing that all together and being able to provide that specified support can make a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And, I know that over the last several years, we've really seen an increase in the rates of victimization in the LGBTQ community. And so seeking services and getting help that is a little more specialized is important. But can you maybe share with us a little bit about the rates in the LGBTQ community, and also why some of what they're experiencing is different than another survivor?
Yeah, absolutely. So the rates are probably about the same or higher. It kind of just depends on which area you're talking about. A lot of the statistics I'll mention today, I did get from the Human Rights Campaign. They're a wonderful agency that does a lot of research on the LGBT community. So that's where we pull a lot of our information. But so 44% of lesbians and 61% of bisexual women have experienced rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And that is compared to 35% of straight women. 46% of bisexual women have been raped in their lifetime. 26% of gay men and 37% of bisexual men have been raped, had physical violence or stalking by an intimate partner within their lifetime, as opposed to 29% of straight men. And almost half, almost 50% of transgender individuals have been sexually assaulted at some point in their lifetime. And also, one statistic that always sticks out so much to me is transgender individuals are twice as likely to be physically assaulted in public than any other individual. It's just seen as, they're seen as lesser. They're seen as, it's kind of almost, society justifies it almost, unfortunately, because of their identity. It's okay for me to, do these acts to them, and it's okay if it's in public. People will agree with me. Has kind of just been normalized. And I think another reason that these statistics can be so high is because the LGBTQ community has been so hypersexualized by society. You see that bisexual women in particular have very high rates, higher rates than most individuals within the community. And I think that's because they're seen as, okay, you are attracted to men and women, so you're readily available, right? You're available for me to do whatever I want because you like everything, which is just completely, of course, not true. And deserve to be able to give that consent and choose who they want to, partake in as well. And also you have to look at the intersections of crisis that these people face that just increases their vulnerability. So homelessness, they have higher rates of homelessness. They have higher rates of medical issues, mental health issues, poverty, marginalization. All of these coming together increases their vulnerability and makes these chances even higher for people to assault them in many different ways, especially sexually. So it's sad to see those numbers, but it's also needed. It's necessary to kind of identify those and let people know and let it sink in and kind of identify that this is an issue. This is, something that is also going on in this community, maybe even worse in this community, maybe even more justified, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're seeing those rates increase year by year on college campuses as well. And they tend to mimic what's happening in the greater picture, but also that's a more concentrated time. So it's almost more alarming or as alarming.
Right.
And we just talked a little bit about why those statistics are so high, but what are some things that we can do as a society? I mean, I always tell people we need to talk about things. We need to stop normalizing violence of any form, and we need to stop justifying it. But are there specific things that we as community can do to help reduce those numbers or to help open the door to more conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. All of those things you mentioned are key, definitely important. Also, just kind of normalizing these relationships, normalizing people having different identities, and not. Society is framed in such a heteronormative way, right? We see relationships as being, male and female. So just kind of normalizing the idea that relationships don't have to be male and female. They don't have to be, just two people. They can be, just kind of normalizing, allowing people to, love and be loved how they want to, and not not justifying, okay, because they don't love the way I love, I can harm them. Just kind of justifying mutual respect, and kindness against for humankind, and also, like you said, starting those conversations, just making it people aware, okay, this is an issue, this is going on, this is something we can't continue to ignore. Starting those conversations, educating yourself and educating others also is huge. Just being educated can do so much. Just, knowing the statistics, understanding the statistics, and understanding the different dynamics that they may face, the barriers they may face, different things of that nature, and then using that knowledge to educate others as well. And also just including them in the conversation when you're talking about sexual assault, when you're talking about sexual violence, just including this as part of the conversation and not just framing it as, women are always the victims and things like that.
Yeah, no, I always tell people that sexual violence does not know, they don't know race, they don't know age, they don't know gender. It happens and it crosses all of those lines. And it is something that, to your point, we need to talk about more. And those are difficult conversations. But we do need to be having them more. So you mentioned a minute ago some of the barriers and things that survivors face. Can you tell us a little bit more about how for the LGBT community, that is a little different than for the straight community? There are definitely more barriers and problems that they face. And can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for, I would say, any victim that has experienced sexual violence, it's so hard to reach out for help. It's so hard to take that step to know how you're going to be treated. But for those survivors in the LGBTQ community, it's even harder to know what is a safe place for me to reach out for help. I know I mentioned the Human Rights Campaign, but one article they did with a statistics that just was so alarming to me, just kind of puts the, nail on the head there. They found that 85% of service providers, so 85% of advocates like you and me, reported that victims that they had worked with that identify as part of the LGBTQ community had previously been denied services because of their identity.
Mm,
So 85%, and that's just advocates reporting
okay,
that.
very high number, and
Right,
in a community that should be welcoming and
absolutely.
should be wanting to help and and help them with their recovery.
Absolutely. And imagine if we got that number straight from, survivors, because if a survivor is treated like that before, what is the likelihood of them reaching out for help again? So there's
Very small.
probably, right. So there's probably so many, individuals that aren't reporting these things that we don't know about. So the number's probably even higher than that, unfortunately. So it's just important to know that they don't always know where they can go for help. So if you are an agency that, does see yourself and has done the work to be an LGBT affirming, agency, it's important that you let that be known. It's important that you advertise that, you put on your website that you're a safe space, that you make it known that LGBTQ victims are also welcome here. This is a safe place for you as well, because it's not always known. Because like you said, these are places that are supposed to offer help, are supposed to be
Right.
safe places. And I'm sure they thought that it was going to be when they first, tried to get help from these places. And then to be met with that bias or hostility or resistance, just, I can't imagine how re-traumatizing that is when you're already, in such a place of vulnerability, and you've already been so traumatized by the violence you've experienced, and then the people that are supposed to be helping you don't.
Right.
So
Because all victims experience that shame and blame
mhm,
on themselves, and they put it on
absolutely.
themselves even though they did nothing to warrant this or ask for this
Mhm,
or deserve this. And so then you add that piece to it. Then if it's happened before and they were treated that way, you add that on top of it, and
yeah,
then you add the lack of support out there. That's a very difficult thing for any person to get through. And so
absolutely.
we definitely need to do better about that. So that brings me to my next question of how can we support LGBTQ survivors, and what are some compassionate and affirming types of things that we can do or say. I know I always get asked from people of, someone told me their story and I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help them. And, we always say the first thing to do is listen. Um,
Absolutely.
and so that would apply to any survivor. But are there some things specifically that we could do that would be, even more helpful for the LGBTQ survivors?
Yeah, like you said, being that active listener, being able to just be that person that they can tell their story to is so important. But taking that to the next step and being not judgmental when they're telling you your story. Don't make facial expressions. Don't, try to just control your reactions, because some of the experiences are very bad, or they may have been something you've never heard of, or something of that nature. So just trying to be as non-judgmental as possible, and respecting their identities and their pronouns is so important as well. I A lot of times when we do presentations on how to be LGBT affirming, people are like, okay, but how do I know how to refer to someone? And that can be such a good question, and it's such a simple answer. I always tell people how they tell you to, however they tell you to. And if you don't know, just ask. What pronouns do you prefer? How do you prefer me to, refer to you as, or what name do you prefer me to call you? And it's okay if you make a mistake also, because we're all human. We're all gonna, learn together.
Right.
But, making a mistake and then genuinely apologizing,
Mhm.
moving on, and then trying not to make that mistake again, right? Trying to get it right the next time. That shows that person that, okay, they are trying. They did listen to me, Um, that
Absolutely.
can go, right. That can go a long way, just having someone identify you and respect, your identity correctly can go a long way. Not making assumptions. So don't make an assumption just
Very good
because of
point.
just because how someone sounds or may look. Don't make assumptions on how they may identify. Um, Also including, like, for different agencies, including LGBT individuals in your magazines, your brochures, your pictures hanging on the wall, different things like that. That increases, oh, I am welcome here. They do serve, people like me. This is a safe place. Using inclusive language, also, not just saying in your brochures or your literature, not only referring to victims as she or her, different things like that can also help. But I think when you're listening to someone tell their story, just that piece of listening and being non-judgmental can go such a long way, because in so many other aspects of their life, they are being judged just because of who they are. So just creating that space of not being judged can be so helpful in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because again, a survivor is judging themselves and worried that others are judging them just as a survivor of a
Right.
sexually violent act. And then to also feel like you're being judged because of who you are.
Mhm.
Again, that's just a double traumatic experience for them, and can actually even pale in comparison to what happened to them physically, because the mental piece of that is so much more damaging in most cases than the physical piece of it. Um,
Absolutely.
so, what would you want people to know about sexual assault, sexual violence, and its impact on the LGBTQ community and its victims?
I would just say we've talked about so many good points today, but I would just say the importance of treating them like any other victim, making sure that you know that if you are serving victims, if you are serving, victims of sexual assault, that LGBT community members are going to be in that group. Just knowing that, like you said earlier, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't have, a certain identity that, sexual violence kind of goes to. No, it doesn't discriminate whatsoever. And also understanding the need for that wraparound services and getting them even more support is so important, because a lot of times victims within the LGBT community are already isolated in one way or another. Maybe when they came out, their family wasn't, supportive of them, or their work or their friends or some portion of their community. So they've been rejected one way or the other. So they may need that extra support. They may need that extra push, and those wraparound services. So being able to connect them to additional services, being able to work with, having partnerships like us, so that way you're able to provide your advocacy services, but also get them extra advocacy services and extra support, is so important, because they may not have that support anywhere else.
And they may
Or,
not be comfortable telling you that
oh,
they have
absolutely.
those needs as well. Um,
Absolutely. And they may not be out. So, say someone comes to you and they're telling you their identity, but maybe their family isn't aware of their identity. So, they may not have anywhere else where they can get that support, or where they can be open and honest about their experiences. So, it's really important to kind of just understand the impact that can happen there on so many different levels outside of just the violence and the trauma that they've experienced.
Absolutely. And, just like with any person, friend, family member that's experienced a trauma, always remember that it is their story to tell. It is not your story to tell, and that you need to respect how they want to handle that. That is very important to the survivor, but especially because they may not, like you said, they may not be ready to tell their family. They may not have come out in public and they're sharing this with you for the first time.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what the trauma was that they experienced. It's important to let it be their story, and for them to tell it as they are ready and able, and not to push them to make decisions, come out, tell their story. That is very, very important. And we see that with survivors that we work with here. That any trauma, you have to respect that for sure.
Absolutely.
So for someone that's maybe not in our area, because obviously if they're in our area, they could go on your website and get some information and some resources to help someone here. But is there a resource nationally that you would recommend to any of our audience today that, maybe needs some resources for someone in another state or another location?
Yeah, absolutely. Centerlink is a website that is kind of part of our nationally recognized LGBT kind of community. And they have a feature on their website where you can search by location for different LGBT centers in your area. And also for youth out there, the Trevor Project is an amazing agency that works with youth who have been experienced violence and suicidal ideations, mental health crisis that are part of the LGBT community. They have a hotline and they have a lot of other resources. They have online chats for youth because I know a lot of today's youth don't feel comfortable, talking on the phone. It may not even be safe for them to do so. So the Trevor Project is also a really good resource for our youth out there.
That's amazing. These are great resources, and I know on RAIN they have some of the similar, and also probably have links to both of those national organizations as well. So as we kind of wrap things up, I always ask, is there one thing you want to make sure our audience hears today or takes away with them?
I think that just like something that you and I have both been mentioning like throughout our entire conversation today is just recognizing that all victims need help. All victims deserve help and deserve support. Even the victims that may not identify as you identify. So just being able to provide that support and knowing that that support is needed and that sexual violence or any violence for that matter doesn't discriminate is so important. So just being able to take away the knowledge and the respect that we should all have about the LGBT community in general, and also the impact that violence has on that community and how staggering it can be, and the layers of trauma that is added on that community, and how that support is definitely detrimental and can be detrimental to even their survival. So just being able to let everyone know that the support is needed and there's work still to be done for sure.
Yes, a very good point. There is lots of work for us to do. There are lots of conversations that need to be had. And so I encourage all of you who are listening today, to be open to some of these conversations. When you hear someone speaking in a way that you don't think is respectful or is fair, and speak up and say something, because the more we can point out the injustices and the detrimental harm that does, the more we will be able to have the conversations that will bring about that change. And we'll hopefully start seeing these terrible statistics. I mean, just sexual violence statistics in general, but really then when you bring it down to the different communities, you realize what's really going on. And we do need to have those conversations. And it's important for us to start stepping up and taking action. And I hope that everybody listening and other people will do that and continue to encourage those conversations, even though that they are very difficult. And even if you don't agree with all of it, it's still important to have those. And as you said, and I think I mentioned earlier, there's still a victim. And it doesn't matter male, female, or part of the LGBTQ or transgender or non-gender conforming. It is very important that as a victim, that they get help and that there is a support system there for them. So I think, to your point, that's the most important thing for us and that we can do, is be supportive, be there and be encouraging, and just listen, that more than anything else.
Absolutely. And like you said, those conversations can be difficult to have and to start. Our agency does provide different trainings to help start those conversations for different agencies, organizations, groups out there. So if you
That's
are saying, okay, I want to have this conversation, but I don't know how. How do I start this conversation with my agency? How do I start this conversation with my community? Feel free to reach out to us. We are more than happy to help you start that conversation, help educate you, and help start that movement of change for sure.
That's wonderful. That's a good thing to know. So on our Facebook page, we have linked to Rebecca's organization, and you can click on that and get more information. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation with us. As I said, I learned a few things, and I hope other people did as well. So as I mentioned at the start, this is my last Facebook Live, as I will be retiring as the executive director. But Virginia Woodward, our new CEO, will be continuing these. So I'm very excited about that. And in fact, in July, she will be interviewing Kelly McGowan, and they will be talking about sexual assault in the military. So I hope that you all will join us for that conversation. And in the meantime, thank you all for being so supportive of the Facebook Lives that we've been doing this year. And again, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us, and
Thank
we
you
will
for
see you
having
next month.
me.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye. Okay, live video is over. I'm
All
going
right.
to stop recording on Zoom.